What's up, everybody? We got a rare team event this week on the PGA Tour, so it's a bit of a weird week to break down, but as always, I will do my best to do it and to do it well. So welcome on into the FanDuel PGA Q&A for this week. I'm your host, Brandon Gdula. I'm the managing editor over at numberFire.com. I'll be talking about the field, the betting odds on FanDuel Sportsbook. No DFS, no daily fantasy slate on FanDuel, but I'll talk about my win simulations and anything else you want because this is a Q&A format. So just hit up the comments section on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch if you have thoughts or questions, honestly, for this event at TPC Louisiana. I will be talking some NFL draft betting props with Jim Sonis between our transition from PGA to MLB today. But for now, we're going to dig into the Zurich Classic. Let's start by looking at this field here. These numbers, they just feel a little peculiar because it's a team event. We don't get a whole lot of this, but it's also a small field. It's 80 teams, so it's 160 golfers, but really it's kind of like an 80 golfer field, the top 35, and ties make the cut. But at the top, you see Jon Rahm and Ryan Palmer, the defending champions from 2019, the last year that this event was played, no event from last year. They are the co-favorites with a dream team for me, with Xander Schauffele and Patrick Cantlay, both 7-1 to win on FanDuel Sportsbook. Cam Smith, Mark Leishman, 10-1. My model doesn't really love them just because Mark Leishman's long-term form is kind of bogging down that team. Bubba Watson and Scottie Scheffler, pretty nice team there. Watson has won here in the past whenever this was a stroke play event. Tony Finau, Cam Champ, Colin Morikawa, Matthew Wolff. I mean, like we got some good, some like high quality name power at the top. It drops off a bit right around there. So Horschel, Burns, Kirk Todd. I mean, that's kind of like these are good teams, but you don't get the two studs, and that's kind of why to me what stands out is Schauffele and Cantlay at the top. I'm going to jump into the field here quickly because it's a little bit hard to figure out what we need to target at TPC Louisiana because with this moving to a team play event 4 years ago, but 3 events ago, the shot link data just kind of drops off. But we do have some years where we have shot link data at TPC Louisiana whenever this was a stroke play event. And this is one of the things that I like to look at this tool here on Data Golf. What drives the variation in scoring? Thank you, Michael. Very busy here on the YouTube chat. My day's good. How's your day? Thank you for calling me a great YouTuber, although I would not necessarily consider myself a YouTuber. What drives variation in scoring at TPC Louisiana? This is basically all like what you typically see at your average. The event average and the tour average is there's a ton of overlap. So nothing really jumps out as more important than anything else. And that's kind of something that we see too whenever we look at their course fit tool. Driving distance at TPC Louisiana does jump out a tad above the tour average at TPC Louisiana. We see a de-emphasis to some degree on driving accuracy and as approach as well. But ultimately, it's not different enough to make a ton of course adjustments, especially whenever we are looking for just the best pairings that we can get, right? So most of my analysis is just averaging team, like both golfers, but also looking at some minimums to make sure that, one golfer is not bogging down the team. So I'm going to jump over to my spreadsheet here, and I'll talk about my win simulations with Schauffele and Cantlay rating out 12.2%. Thank you, Michael. I'm not down on myself. I'm just a little self-deprecating sometimes. So that's all. Schauffele and Cantlay rate out at 12.2% likely to win in my win simulations, making them, even though they're co-favorites at 7-1 with Rahm and Palmer, they are my model's favorite pick to win, and that's why I really like them. They were teammates in the 2019 President's Cup. I believe they went 2-2, but they have some experience playing together. And frankly, if you're just looking for golfers who do everything well, Schauffele and Cantlay fit from that angle. And I actually went through and I have some similarity scores here for each team. And you can see if I sort by this, they're gonna lead in no longer because Rocco Mediate they don't play Rocco Mediate this week. But Schauffele and Cantlay, 93% similarity, so a lot of overlap with what they do well. And then they also drive the ball very similarly. So they're going to see similar tee shots to what they usually would if playing alone. So that's going to help them whenever they flip to alternate shot. But you can see here too that Ryan Palmer, Jon Rahm, they're a very good combo. Lots of overlap for them, and their average adjusted strokes gained data rates out quite well. And then that's kind of like your top duo. And I really wouldn't fault you kind of for betting either, but for me, I'm going to side with Schauffele and Cantlay. I'm going to go down here. I'll resort this by win odds and look at the second tier because I do think that there are a few options in that second tier, specifically Bubba Watson, Scottie Scheffler. I like both of them from a tee to green standpoint. You can see 96 percentile adjusted tee to green play over the past year. Watson, again, former winner here. Scottie Scheffler, just a really good player all around, aside from the chipping. The putting's not great, but combined, they should be able to go low for that best ball format. Colin Morikawa and Matthew Wolff don't particularly rate out as someone I love from the win simulations. I would prefer Scottie Scheffler and Morikawa at 14-1, and I would also prefer Watson and Scheffler to Tony Finau and Cameron Champ. Thank you, Michael. My longest drive is probably like 250. I'm not a very good golfer. I'm working on it. 300, that's a great drive. I would assume you're probably a scratch golfer. I think the best like second tier play for this week is going to be Max Homa and Taylor Gooch. My model likes them. And you can see that they really stack up well, kind of all things considered, across the board with their tee to green play in the 83rd percentile, their approach play, and then in the 85th percentile. And so they are also one of those teams that are very similar, right? And that's kind of something that I'm looking for. If you look at the past winners here with Ryan Palmer, Jon Rahm profiles, even though Jon Rahm does everything substantially better. Scott Piercy, Billy Horschel, somewhat similar. Jonas Blix, Cam Smith, pretty similar as well. So they have that similarity boost, and I like that at 31-1 on FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm not really into too many other pairings in this range. I don't really see a whole lot of value in that range, but jumping down a little bit more, I like Jason Kokrak and Pat Perez this week. They moved from 65-1 to 45-1, making it a little harder to recommend them outright, but maybe something like a top 5 or top 10 would be in the cards. But I still think that they have what it takes to kind of fare well at TPC Louisiana. Just good tee to green play and good putting as well. Once you combine their stats and you actually adjust those for field strength, Kokrak not necessarily known as a good putter, but does have that once you adjust for the field strength. No real weaknesses off the tee, and just statistically 91st percentile in this field with their stats for what I'm looking for this week. One possible blemish is that Kokrak's longer off the tee than Perez, so they don't have a whole lot of similarity there, but perhaps they can kind of figure things out and play well together. My favorite sport to play is golf, Michael, and I love basketball as well. Probably, I would say basketball, but it's a lot easier to play golf because I can go out by myself. I don't need 10 people to play some basketball. Some other long shots that I'm into is Matthew Neesmith, Chase Seifert. I talked about them today earlier when I did some content for FanDuel Hurry Up. You can see here 91st percentile strokes gained approach. Where the red flags come in is with the putting. They're not quite a red flag with you around the green, but just barely missed that. With the 26th percentile, they have a lot of that similarity as well, though. And they're in the 91st percentile, or 91st. They have a 91% similarity with their driving stats, we like to see for this team event, so that they're, again, playing in similar situations, playing holes similarly to how they would play normally, by being paired with golfers with similar accuracy stats, similar off the tee numbers overall, and driving distance as well. And again, that similarity score being really strong is something that I like to see. Doc Redman, Sam Ryder, I don't particularly love this worst duo in adjusted around the green play, but very good with their approach numbers, 86th percentile. So Redman and Ryder, another pairing that kind of plays similarly off the tee, but that is more from an accuracy standpoint, which is something that is a little bit de-emphasized this week, but still, lots of overlap with them. And I think that they're an underrated pairing at 100-1 to win on FanDuel Sportsbook. I'm not, you'll see here, Justin Rose, Henrik Stenson, 33-1. I'm not really going to jump in on that because Stenson's really bogging things down. And that's one thing that I would talk about as being particularly important this week, not looking at just your averages, but also looking at, is one golfer substantially bogging down the team or not? So Rose and Stenson, not really a duo that I'm looking at for this week. I kind of covered just about everyone I wanted to go over in particular. I think that, again, Cantlay Scheffler is my favorite pairing at the top. I really believe that they are valued properly for this week at 7-1 to win on FanDuel Sportsbook. Bubba Watson, Scottie Scheffler, a pairing that I like quite a bit as well. And then I really strongly recommend Max Homa, Taylor Gooch, even if it's just for a top 10 at 31-1. They have the right makings to succeed for a team event, but also at TPC Louisiana. So I think that's all I have for this week. Again, it's kind of a strange event. It's a strange setup overall. So I'm going to bring on Jim Sonis. We're going to talk some NFL. But if you do have more golf questions, feel free, and I'll get to those before 4. Jim, you ready to go?
Never. Absolutely not. How dare you possibly even ask that? So we're going to talk NFL draft because we didn't have a heat check today, which means that basically golf doesn't exist in my life. So I have no thoughts at all on the Zurich Classic. I mean, if you're on Cantlay and Scheffler, I'm not going to push back on that. I think that sounds great. So if that's where the Gdula stamp of approval goes, I'm on board as well.
I mean, if I blindly told you that Xander and Cantlay were paired together, wouldn't you would say, give me those guys, right?
Well, I didn't even have to pull up I was talking with our producer Cal today about the thumbnail for this YouTube thing. We were trying to figure out, who do we put on this? And I didn't want to ask you because you've got better stuff to worry about. So I didn't want to bother you. So I just pulled up your win sims and I was like, oh, cool. If you had just told me that they were paired together, I didn't even have to bother to look. So I think that's fair. Let's talk some NFL draft here, Brandon, because next week on Thursday and Friday, we are going to have an NFL draft live stream with you, me, Ryan Williams, and JJ Zacharias. We're going to go through the first and second and third rounds of the NFL draft. So the first 2 nights will be live on YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter. So, of course, if you're not already subscribed, make sure you do so right now to get yourself subscribed for those 2 nights. If you haven't followed Ryan yet, make sure you do so as well because he is a new contributor here at numberFire and FanDuel. He'll be talking NFL draft, mostly focusing on DFS and best ball stuff. So excited to have Ryan on board. That'll be a lot of fun. But I did want to pick your brain a bit here because I have not gotten to talk draft with you yet. I have talked it with JJ Zacharias already a little bit. We were doing some videos for the draft. I have not gotten to pick you yet, so to pick your brain yet. So do you have any hot takes about this year's NFL draft that you're ready to drop?
Hot takes? I mean, I don't really do a whole lot of hot takes. I try to keep things grounded all the time, but no, I mean, it's been a little strange for me to dig back into NFL because I usually I let it go as close as I can to the draft because a big part of my process is looking at evaluations and consensus rankings because draft equity alone tells us so much. And I do build out models for predictability, for effectively who's going to fare well from like a net expected point standpoint, which is basically there's a huge overlap with our net expected points metric at numberFire and fantasy production. But realistically, I'm looking for guys who, what profiles lead to volume and production at the NFL level. A big part of that is draft equity, because spending high draft equity on players means that you want to get them the ball, but also that you have a lot invested in them. So that's a big part of my process. So I'm still getting, into things, but I think that I'm starting to form some takes. Particularly, I dug most into wide receivers because running back at first glance didn't look particularly great.
So I'm going to pull up the wide receiver stuff now based on the odds over at FanDuel Sportsbook. I know I'm not able to screen share right now, but I'm going to ask you. Okay, so Devontae Smith, his over-under at FanDuel Sportsbook is 11.5, minus 134 on the under. Jamar Chase is 5.5, pretty even odds on both sides there. Jalen Waddle is also 11.5, so he and Devontae Smith weirdly even, which is fun. So they're both Alabama guys. They're like 11 days apart in age as well. So weirdly connected at all times there. Kyle Pitts, more similar to Jamar Chase at 5.5. The under is minus 156. The over is plus 128. Have you been able to dig in enough on those guys to develop any takes, any value you're seeing on those four guys based on the odds at FanDuel Sportsbook?
Well, I would say two of those at least. I'm having a hard time with Smith, Devontae Smith, because he's kind of, I won't say unprecedented, but with his weight, it is, I just feel like there's a wide range of how he might be valued. But I think Jamar Chase, that over under 5.5, I'm seeing a lot, and I have my takes and everything. That's why I was joking about not having hot takes. I think there's a lot of value in the wisdom of the crowds, and I've been looking at a lot of mock drafts and kind of figuring things out. I'm inclined to go with that over, just because it is so low. Yeah, and we have, yes, it's not unreasonable for a wide receiver to go inside the top 5, but realistically, I mean, without the 2020 season from him, and with quarterbacks getting just hammered in the top 3, I think that there's not a whole lot of wiggle room. So I kind of like that over. What about you?
Well, I think that there are multiple paths to an over with Jamar Chase. And I think that that's kind of the way I like to view things from an NFL draft perspective. I like to look at paths because you find out the realistic paths you can get to either an over or an under, and then in your head, calculate the odds of each path occurring, add up those odds, and that gets you to this path. So with Jamar Chase, the path for him going under 5.5 would be Atlanta taking him at 4. There has been almost no buzz about that. They could go quarterback. They could trade down with the team trading up to get a quarterback. So I think that probably not going 4, which means basically what I think this prop is what are the odds Jamar Chase goes 5 to the Bengals? And that could happen because there's been a lot of discussion about Joe Burrow wanting Jamar Chase back with the Bengals. So that could very realistically happen. But it seems like just based on reading the more recent tea leaves, it does seem as if I would be leaning towards the over here. It seems like Penei Sewell is kind of more of the more likely pick to go number 5.
It makes more sense, right?
Yeah. I've done a lot of research in the value of offensive line going, in the first round and what it adds to your team. It is an immediate upgrade. Almost even if you don't look at the quality of that offensive lineman, you just look at the fact that, hey, they use a first round pick on an offensive lineman, you can expect improvements the next year. So Sewell, his under 5.5 is plus 128. I actually think that you could do both these. You go Chase over 5.5, take Sewell under 5.5. I kind of think that is an enticing way to play things here because it seems like Daniel Jeremiah and Peter Schrager both had Rashawn Slater, go Cats, going ahead of Penei Sewell. But those seem to be the outliers, and we haven't seen movement towards that. Actually, Schrager had a new mock today where he had Sewell going 5th overall and Slater, I think, going 8th. So I think Sewell probably going to be the first offensive lineman. And I think the Bengals more likely to go offensive line than pass catcher. So I think that if you were going to try to go for some correlated props, you go with the over on Jamar Chase, the under on Sewell, and I think you kind of tie those together. I feel like that's a viable route to go. And especially with the Chase over one, you're benefiting there if a team does trade up to number 5 to take to number 4 rather, to take a quarterback, because then you could also see the Bengals go Pitts if they decide not to go with Sewell. So I think that's kind of the way that I'm thinking about this year.
Yeah, and you're big on the correlated props, right? That's kind of one of the things you like to do a lot.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that if you're doing like a same game parlay, they account for it. Like, you're not doing that for the draft because I don't think those aren't available. But like, I like to think about, the way that things break in that perspective. So from a same game parlay, they account for the interconnectivity between things. With this, they're not, and you're not going to parlay them together unless you want to. I probably wouldn't personally, but like, I do like to take correlated props, even if they're not in a parlay, just because if one hits, the odds the other one hits also increase. So I feel like that is a pretty viable way to play things. I actually have another golf question from Anthony. He was looking at some long shot pairings. He wants to know, what do you feel about Joel Damon and Lonto Griffin? Oh boy, 2 more favorites there. Uline and Wierenski, and then Clark and Van Rooyen. Any thoughts on those long shots for this week?
Yeah, I would rank those Joel Damon and Lonto Griffin as my number 1. Very, very good tee to green performers there, and that's just a very good start. Then I would go with Wyndham Clark, Eric Van Rooyen. I'm a little bit intrigued there, but Clark's a lot longer off the tee, so I don't know how that's going to mesh together. And again, it's one of the things that I'm kind of looking for this week. But Damon Griffin, really interesting pairing for me this week.
I will always pick the Joel Damon pairing, and adding in Lonto Griffin just makes it even better. So I think that is fair. Okay, so I want to talk to you about the number 3 pick because that's been the most buzzed about one. Do you have your similarity thingamabobber, the technical term, open right now?
What do you mean specifically?
I want to hear your most common or your most similar prospects for Mac Jones and Justin Fields, if you have them.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, so Mac Jones right now plus 115 to go 3rd overall. Justin Fields plus 105. Trey Lance plus 270. And we've seen a lot of movement in this market. Now, I think that the one thing that's worth noting for NFL draft props is that because it's less of a, like, there's not as much money in this market, when you see movement, it's not always tied to like heavy money coming in, and it's not always going to be as predictive. So even though there's been movement, one point towards Justin Fields, and now there's been movement against Justin Fields, I think mostly towards Trey Lance, that does not necessarily mean that it's a predictive thing because the caps on things are so much lower here. So I just want to note that. But there has been a lot of movement. So I think that the 49ers would be pretty ridiculous to not take Justin Fields there. So I don't need to personally go at this one because we talked about this in the FanDuel Hurry Up a couple weeks ago, where I thought that at the time you could get Justin Fields under 4.5 for I think minus 116. You're not going to get that anymore. So I think that I'm good with Justin Fields props. So Brandon, plus 105. Do your numbers like Justin Fields enough for you to be inclined to take that, or are you just staying out of here?
So that's actually 2 different questions, and I was going to throw it back to you as well. Okay. Because the one question is, do my numbers like Justin Fields enough for him to go number 3? That answer is a fairly easy yes.
Okay.
He has a lot of good comps in his profile right now. And again, this is not play style anything. It's based on the most predictive metrics that I have found that predicts NFL success. Profile only with some size in there, a little bit of rushing. His best comps, Zach Wilson, Trey Lance are in the mix.
Pretty funny.
Joe Burrow,
okay.
Patrick Mahomes,
okay.
Tua Tagovailoa,
okay.
Kyler Murray,
okay.
Alex Smith,
okay.
Your boy Mariota's in there.
Oh, okay.
But that's kind of lots of high ceiling players, I would say.
Yeah.
In his profile comps. For Mac Jones, Dwayne Haskins.
I know what his top comp is. I know that one.
Dwayne Haskins. He's getting a Brandon Whedon number 2. Rex Grossman, 2 is in there. Sam Bradford.
Sam Bradford one makes a lot of sense. Sam Bradford is also older and less experienced, so I can see that one. That one I can get.
Yeah. So
also the reason Dwayne Haskins to me was super obvious, and he's actually like if I were to list out a comp for Mac Jones, I think Dwayne Haskins is that, because they have a lot of very similar red flags. Haskins was 21. He just finished his age 21 season coming out. Mac Jones just finished his age 22 season, but Jones, I think, turned 22 in September. if I recall correctly, so coming off his age 22 season, so he's a little bit older than Dwayne Haskins, but similar level of experience, 1 full year starter for both those guys. Both had very good efficiency numbers. But when you have players who are less experienced 1 year starters, the hit rate on them is pretty low, especially when it's as low from a total perspective as they are. And with Jones, the concern is even more apparent because he's older. So I think that that's a concern there. The other reason I think that they're interesting is that both those guys came from offenses that were tailored towards them, that involved a lot of yards after the catch. Like Mac Jones, percentage of his passes that traveled, didn't get behind the line or didn't get beyond the line of scrimmage. I think it's like 22% based on Pro Football Focus's numbers. Trevor Lawrence's was high too, but I think a lot of that was because of the issues they had at wide receiver. T. Higgins left, Justin Ross is hurt. So that's, I feel like that's not super scary. It is though for Mac Jones. So I think there's a lot of overlap between Mac Jones and Dwayne Haskins. So I think the top comp for Mac Jones is correct based on what your numbers have in Dwayne Haskins. But I do want to caution that by saying that does not mean that Mac Jones is a bad prospect. Because if you took Dwayne Haskins and put him, hypothetically, on the 49ers offense right now, or coming out of college, I think that the odds he would have been a successful quarterback in the NFL would have been pretty high. Going to Washington is a lot different than going to San Francisco. So that's why I think that labeling him as the top comp for Mac Jones does not mean I don't think Mac Jones should go in the first round. It just means that there are red flags there, and I'd rather have Justin Fields. Does that make sense?
Yes. So again, that's like the 2-part question.
Right.
Is Fields the best prospect of the 3 going? Yes, to me, he is. Does that mean I would bet him whenever it's possibly like a 3-person, like a 3-sided coin or something, like a 3-sided die? Like that's
where are you finding a 3-sided die?
That was a joke.
Okay.
But that's the thing is we don't know. And sometimes when I feel confident, I'm okay leaning away from something like that, even because what I think isn't necessarily what NFL, coaches are thinking.
So Cal's saying that there is a 3-sided die. How does that work? It's for Dungeons and Dragons. Okay. How does that work? Can someone make an origami 3-sided die for me so I can understand how this works? I'm not really understanding the logistics of the way, is it like this or what is?
Oh, those are interesting.
Okay. I'm going to Google this here. I could leave it on the screen share computer, but never mind. That's not up yet. 3-sided die. Okay. Well, that's weird. Anyway, it's not. Yeah.
But do you agree, or do you feel like whenever you think, you say, hey, Fields is the best guy, he makes sense to bet? Or in this situation, are you maybe a team's looking for?
I know that I'm not betting Mac Jones. I think that is my most definitive take for the 3rd overall pick, which is weird because Adam Schefter, I've never doubted Adam Schefter in my entire life, and I never will. I think that the fact that he backpedaled a bit on the way that he phrased it is intriguing to me. But I'm never going to say that's why I'm not saying you must bet Justin Fields. I'm good. I got the under 4.5. At -116, I'm set. I don't need to bet him at to go 3rd overall. But what I'm also saying is I'm definitely not going to bet Mac Jones. I think that's what I'm taking away here most of all.
Yeah. So I think that's a big thing to keep in mind, and it's a hard thing to balance sometimes because sometimes my numbers say, hey, this guy's better, and then you see the draft equity or the big board rankings not quite agreeing with some of the things. And so, I win some, I lose some,
Sure.
But that's why I try to take everything into account whenever I'm doing this, because I think there's a lot of value in the wisdom of the crowds, I said before. And, again, we'll learn a lot based on where teams actually go on draft night, but it can be very easy to kind of dig your feet in and say no, it's.
Oh, I'm aware, as someone who as recently as 5 minutes ago was a massive Marcus Mariota truther. Believe me, I know about digging in, baby, and it's not good when it does happen. But that's Brandon Gdula. We're going to have you back next Thursday on the NFL Draft live stream again with JJ Zachariason and Ryan Williams. So we're going to get your thoughts. We'll talk about your win simulation. We have dueling win total projection systems that we're going to compare throughout the draft as things go along. So we'll talk about that, talk about DFS implications of the draft. Brandon, thank you. Appreciate it. Good luck with the Zurich Classic, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Yeah, I guess you're not really digging into the Zurich, but
no,
we'll be meeting up next
Absolutely
week.
not.
Talk some PGA and some NFL. So
absolutely, we'll do that. No Zurich for me though. That's Brandon Gdula. Follow him on Twitter at Gdula13. Check out his win simulations as well for this week's PGA event. I did see Devontae had a question, or I guess a comment. Mac Jones better at digesting info than Dwayne Haskins. I mean, like, that's probably true. I know that I am not going to be able to identify that though personally. So for me, I want to identify similarities. I think there are a lot of similarities in the way Mac Jones and Dwayne Haskins got their big efficiency numbers, and that was via yards after the catch, via good offensive systems, via talented people around them. That's kind of the similarity. Devontae, I can't personally judge if he's a great processor. That's where I have the concern. So that's pretty tough for me to judge. Totally could be fair. I don't really know necessarily if that's true, but still, I think that this is where I'm coming from, is I look for similarities, and there are similarities between them, which is why it's concerned. But again, Dwayne Haskins, if he were on a team like the 49ers, could have been a success if he had gone there. You know, if Dwayne Haskins were a prospect in this year's class, went to the 49ers, I think he could have been a success at some point. And I think the same is true with Mac Jones. I'd just rather have Justin Fields. So let's transition now and talk a little MLB DFS for today. I know Devontae said on Twitter that he won some money last night. Congratulations to you, Devontae. Let's run it back, win some more again for today. Checking out the slate here on FanDuel for today, Corbin Burns is kind of the one dude at the top of the pitching pool who I really want to use. Now, Corbin Burns is in a very difficult matchup here with the San Diego Padres. As you can see here, they are a glaring red matchup, 125 WRC plus, just a 19% strikeout rate versus righties. But then you scroll over here, you see all the green for Corbin Burns. This is a 4-star sample for Corbin Burns, where he's been throwing a lot of cutters. Basically what he used to do is he would throw more sinkers than cutters. He has reversed that now, more cutters than sinkers. And shockingly, because we hate sinkers here, we hate on the solo shot, we hate sinkers always. Shockingly, with Corbin Burns ditching that terrible, terrible pitch, he's been awesome. 43% strikeout rate over his past 4 starts, 3% walk rate, 1.63 skill interactive ERA. He's very good. So yeah, the matchup is tough, but he's tremendous. And I think that he is like 16 steps above every other pitcher on this slate. So Corbin Burns, my number one pitcher. You can see the pitch counts over here in the notes section. He has not gone longer than 87 yet so far. Talked about that this morning on the podcast. I don't care. He went 81 pitches in his most recent start. He hit for himself in the 6th inning. They were planning on having him go out there for the 7th, but he drove in a run. It was 7-0 by the end of the inning, and they said, okay, 7-run lead. Let's yank Burns out, save him for the rest of the season. And he didn't go back out there. He could have gone longer than 81. He just didn't because it was a 7-0 game. There was no need to. So I'd project him for 95 or so pitches for tonight. If he gets that, even against a tough Padres team, I think Corbin Burns is just a tremendous option. Altair saying, I feel like it's easier to just use a 6-sided die and just duplicate every number to make a 3-sided die. Yes, I think that is true too, because I have a 6-sided die. I'll have to call Cal to get his D&D dies, because the 3-sided die still has my mind in a pretzel, so I'm not going to be able to make that work. But yes, I think a 6-sided die would work a lot better for my mental sanity for sure. Outside of Corbin Burns, I think the number 2 pitcher for today is Hunjin Ryu. He's facing the Red Sox. Ryu, a tremendous pitcher always. He's been a great pitcher for a very long time. The reason I don't wind up on him in DFS all that often is because he doesn't have a super high strikeout rate traditionally. However, strikeout rate has gone up the past 2 years. It was 26% last year. For the most relevant sample I have on Ryu, it's his past 6 starts with his sinker usage being down. Again, ding, ding, ding. Fewer sinkers, good things happen. 25% strikeout rate. That's not super high, but outside of Burns, there aren't a lot of high strikeout pitchers on this slate. Like Ohtani's on a pitch count. Eduardo Rodriguez, still a small sample with him, facing the Blue Jays, who are very good. So I'm not getting the opportunity cost in using Ryu tonight. Taking that lower strikeout rate is lower than what it usually is. So I think that Ryu, a really solid number 2 behind Corbin Burns for today. But I think that overall, I want to load up on Corbin Burns, which means a little bit less Hunjin Ryu just naturally. And I can look at guys as the third pitcher, but realistically, I do think that it is all about Burns and then Ryu winding up second. We're talking MLB DFS here to get you set for Tuesday night slate. If you have questions about tonight's slate, whether you're watching on Facebook, you can watch on YouTube, Twitter, or I don't know the one, Twitch. If you are watching any of those places, feel free to get your questions in. We'll answer them live here on the air to get you set for Tuesday's slate. And one of those questions comes from Diffuse. How many Cardinals should you be playing for today? So, talked about that this morning. I think the Cardinals are the numbers 2 stack for today behind the Astros. Astros at Coors Field. It's colder today than usual, which is a downgrade for Coors Field, but I still think they're number 1. Cardinals are number 2, which means hypothetically 4. You should get to 4 Cardinals for today because I think that, you always want to maximize your stacks. If you are building one lineup, ideally you are using 4 players from 2 separate teams. So get to 4 if you can. I think that that's kind of the way that I do it here for the Cardinals. Their lineup is out. I know the Astros are not out as of yet. Let's pull up the Cardinals lineup here. Double Dong Paul DeJong, batting 6th. He is $2,800. Good to see him show some power last night. It's not really point chasing. He's, I think that he was a good play before the 2 home run game last night. Batting 6th, I think that he's probably the first guy you wind up locking in here. So let's go to the Cardinals. Let's lock in Burns. I'm going to put Double Dong DeJong in there at shortstop, and we have $3,100 left. Let's go over to the Cardinals versus Lefties. This is since the start of last year. It is a small sample, which is definitely concerning, but I'm okay with that. Okay, so Tommy Edman, 31% hard hit rate versus Lefties, 21% fly ball rate, an okay ISO. Meh. Yadier Molina, this is also a small sample because he's a catcher, so he's not going to play every day. He's actually been playing pretty well so far this year. He's always had a high hit rate, high hard hit rate, but the barrel percentage for Molina in the past had been low. This year, it's creeping up. It's 11.4%. That to me is very interesting. So you see his expected weighted on base average is 366. His actual WOBA is 395. So sure, he'll come back to earth a bit, but he actually is striking the ball pretty well. So I think that Molina, despite the fact his salary has gone up pretty significantly, is still worthwhile at $3,100. I also think you can include Paul Goldschmidt at 38 and not be in a huge hole. So I'm going to put Goldschmidt in there. We have Dylan Carlson batting 5th. Carlson, a switch hitter. So that means we can't be, just like, oh, okay, he's a righty. Carlson, I believe, I was looking at this yesterday. I'm going to go to his career splits. It's going to be a small sample still. I believe his numbers versus lefties in said small sample were not too bad. Do you want to check that here to make sure we're not spewing some falsities? So go to splits. Let's go to career, and we want to make sure, because this will be a small sample for Carlson, that we're focusing on the numbers that stabilize most quickly. So it's a 26 plate appearance sample, very small sample. It's not ideal. Low strikeout rate, though, at 23%. Low ground ball rate. I can't feel great about that. Ideally, I would pull up Dylan Carlson's baseball reference page and see what he did in the minors versus left-handed pitchers, but they've got him batting 6th. His salary is not super restrictive for today. He is $3,200. That's not too bad. I feel like I'd probably go with Carlson over Edman just because I feel better about Carlson actually having some semblance of power than I do about Edman. So I think that's where I'm leaning right now, is going with Carlson over Edman, even though Carlson is a little bit higher salary. Austin Dean, $2,300. Let's pull up his numbers versus lefties here throughout his career. It's going to be recently it's a decently small sample because he's not, an everyday type player. I was looking at his game logs, and there have been a couple of times where he has left early. So it's the same thing we talk about with the Giants, where you want to be pretty careful because we'll see guys like this get yanked early on if the left-handed pitcher leaves the game. But Austin Dean versus lefties, 107 career plate appearances, 24% strikeout rate, 124 ISO. Not the best batted ball numbers. I'd rather try to get up to Carlson, Edman, something like that, as opposed to settling for Dean. Like sometimes you're going to have to settle for the value play, but I do think that I'd rather not do that personally. Michael, Houston lineup not out yet, but it seems like it could be difficult to stack Houston with Burns. Very true. The one saving grace there, Michael, is that the Astros, because a lot of their guys were still on the injured list when this slate came out, they didn't get their salaries jacked up for Coors Field. You've got Bregman at $3,500. I don't know if Alvarez will play today because he is not really a great defensive player, so he might not play. But we do have Bregman, $3,500. We have Carlos Correa at $3,600. That's not too bad. Alvarez, if he plays, $3,500. That makes a lot of sense. Other thing I'd mention here is Mlb Dfs, $3,300. Altuve sounds like he's not going to be activated for today, which means that Diaz more likely to play. Diaz might hit $6,000, $3,300. Let's pull up the early season numbers here for Mlb Diaz and see what he's been doing so far. But the overall takeaway here, Michael, I think, is that because the salaries didn't get jacked up as much for the Astros as they usually would, they're easier to get to than you might think. Diaz last year, 241 ISO, very small sample. He's had some barrels so far this year, probably 3 barrels so far for Diaz. That's not too bad. Let's check out the fly ball rates here. Not the best, but still. I think there's enough there, given it's at Coors Field, given the Astros lineup pretty solid. So I'd say that Diaz does make sense. So if we go with Diaz, Bregman, Correa, that's 28-20 left. If you're willing to use guys like Dean, DeYoung fits there too. You'd have to put him at, or you just put Correa at utility and DeYoung at shortstop. You do have to make some consolations, but I think you can make it work. So, Michael, once it comes out, try to identify value plays. I think, again, you're looking at like Diaz, Bregman's under salary, Correa's under salary too, and plugging them in and seeing what you have to work with. But I think you can make it work. I think you can make that happen. Jason, aside stacks and pitchers, what are some of your favorite tournaments to play on FanDuel, single entry, multi-entry? So, Jason, that depends on the slate. Yesterday, we were talking about Joe Musgrove. I thought it was a tremendous single entry slate because there was really only one pitcher who I wanted to use. So every time, like let's say I'm doing multi-entry, a 10 max contest, that means that if I don't go Musgrove in all 10, I am using suboptimal plays in some of those lineups. That's why I want to go with a single entry type contest because I can use only optimal plays in that slot. So that to me, I just like single entry more in general, but I think it especially does depend on the slate. I tend to skew towards single entry in general, so that's kind of the way that I skew. But otherwise, I think realistically, most people watching this probably not entering 150 lineups. So I think that FanDuel has a lot of contests that are like $2 entries and like 25 max. Those are really good if you're like a lower bankroll player. You're not going up against people with 150 lineups, you can potentially max enter that one as well. Lower entry fee, give yourself some education room. I think those are really good tournaments to play as well. Some other ones are like 3 entry max. Those are pretty fun too. I think there's generally a $12 contest on FanDuel, 3 entries max. I would say skew towards those. To me, the fewer entries, the better, because I like to hand fill lineups and I don't want to hand fill 150. So I tend to gravitate towards fewer entries as being better, but that does depend on the slate. Like if there are 6 pitchers I want to use, different thing. And it's not optimal to play it that way based on how many pitchers I want to use because everyone else has the same stuff. But, just from a fun perspective, a funness perspective, that does influence things for me. Devontae, need some value plays. Okay, so to identify value plays, let's pull up the stacks here. I talked about the Cardinals. I think that DeYoung at $2,800 definitely makes sense. You could go Dean as well. I think that's fine. Other options for today, let's check out the Angels to see if their lineup is out yet. I really doubt it is. They tend to be on the later side of things, so probably not going to be out. I talked yesterday on the stream about Jose Rojas. He did not wind up playing. I was very sad about that because I had some preliminary lineups filled out with him in there, dependent on his minimum salary. He didn't play. I was sad. End of story. Rojas, though, $2,000. I think there's a legit chance he could hit as high as 6th or so today. I don't know if Ohtani will bat today. He did hit last time he was pitching, but because he's on a restricted pitch count, I could see them being more willing to have him be just a pitcher and not have him out there as a hitter as well. Because once he leaves the game, they lose a DH. So if he's going to go only 4 to 5 innings, you don't want to have a pitcher spot in there for the final 4 to 5 innings. So I think there's a legit chance he's not hitting for today, in which case the odds that Rojas is in there are higher, could hit higher in the order. I think that that's a good play. So I would say, Devontae, check out the Angels lineup once it's out. See if Jose Rojas is in there. And if he is, I think he'll be a tremendous value play for today. If he does wind up playing, you could count Pujols in there. I know he was fine last night. I'm not super eager to use him personally, but you could consider that as well. So I would say DeYoung, potentially Dean, and then I think looking at Rojas, guys, I would be. They already said he's not here today. Okay, so thank you, Devontae. Appreciate that. That helps a lot. So I think the odds that Rojas is in there are higher. So I think that does lower the impact of the entire Angel stack, because fewer plate appearances from Shohei Ohtani means fewer potential home runs, fewer guys getting on base. So it does downgrade everyone in the lineup, but if it gives us Rojas a minimum salary batting 7th or 6th, I'll take it. A worthwhile trade-off there for sure. Cody, do you list off your stats you use for batters and pitchers on FanGraphs? Okay, let's go over here. So that's actually a good question because it's still pretty early in the season. So might be helpful to go through an overall stats discussion here with Cody. Before we do that, from Twitch, can St. Louis repeat last night's success? Yes, I think they are my number one stack for today. It's not because of what they did last night. It's not because Patrick Corbin got rocked his last time out. It's because Corbin, the spin rate on his slider is down a lot. He's using his slider less. I think that's a big red flag. So yes, in on the Cardinals for sure. Cody, so the numbers I look at over on FanGraphs, let's just pull up Corbin Burns' page and show you the numbers we're working with here. So you can build out a custom leaderboard on FanGraphs. If you have your own login, which I'd recommend doing, get your membership so you're not getting the ads. Worthwhile for sure. A good investment to get a FanGraphs membership. Would endorse 10 out of 10. The numbers I look at on FanGraphs, skill interactive ERA. What this does is it takes luck out of the equation. It takes your strikeouts, your walks, your batted ball data, and says, okay, if we take luck and just look at the skill, what would this guy's ERA be? You see, for Corbin Burns, is 1.01 over his first 3 starts. Pretty freaking good. So we're going to take that every day. That's the number one number you look at. If you want like an all-encompassing number, I think that skill interactive ERA is the place to go. Strikeout rate is huge. I prefer strikeout rate over strikeouts per 9 because let's say hypothetically one guy faces 3 batters in an inning. He strikes out 1 of them. His strikeout rate is 33%. One guy faces 6 batters because he walks 3 guys, also strikes out 1. Those 2 guys have the same strikeouts per 9 innings. However, the strikeout rate for the other guy is much lower, or is going to be much lower for the guy who walked 3 guys. That's why you want to skew towards strikeout rate versus strikeouts per 9 innings. So strikeout rate, walk rate, barrel percentage is good. If you want more data on barrel percentage and why it's relevant, just search for Kenyatta Storin numberFire. He did a piece about barrel percentage over the offseason. Very good read. Would recommend that as well. Shows the value of barrel rate both for hitters and for pitchers. So for me, when I am putting pitcher stats on my sheet, it's skill interactive ERA, strikeout rate, walk rate, and barrel percentage. Those are the key numbers to lean on for me, and they all stabilize pretty quickly. So I can look at a 2-start sample for someone and say, okay, I feel pretty good about knowing what to expect out of this pitcher going forward based on what they've done here. For offenses, like for individual batters, barrel percentage is great. You can't get split percentage or split numbers on barrel rate versus lefty versus righties, at least as far as I've found on FanGraphs. So hard hit rate, fly ball rate versus splits, and also strikeout rate. Those are the numbers that stabilize most quickly. You don't really want to look at WRC plus versus handedness for an individual batter. You can look at it for a team, but for batters, it takes so long to stabilize, and you're cutting your sample a lot by looking at versus lefty versus righty. So I would caution against WRC plus for platoon splits, but strikeout rate's good, hard hit rate good, fly ball rate good. Hopefully that helps you out, Cody, to help you get going there. Any huge weather concerns? Not from a rain perspective, but there are weather concerns from a temperature perspective. So you see I have temperature here on the sheet. For pitchers, it shows up as being better the colder it is. That's because balls do not fly as well when it's cold out as they do when it's warm. So I am downgrading hitters for the Cubs, Mets, Royals, Rays, Rockies, and Astros because they are in such cold weather. Now, with that said, the Astros are still a good play because they're at Coors Field, which is basically playing on the moon. So they're still a good stack. However, you do downgrade Coors Field from where it's usually at because it is cold for today. So no real rain concerns, but there are weather notes with the cold temperatures for those 3 games. Jason, I've centered my work breaks around the show. Nice. Love to hear it. Also took your advice on pitchers, and it seems like we land on similar pitchers. Yeah, I think for today, we're going Corbin Burns, Hunjin Ryu, number 2. Devontae is also centering his work breaks around this. Love to hear it. You can watch a replay after the fact, but you can't get the questions in, so hopefully that trade-off is worth it. You guys have anyone who does basketball streams? No, not streams yet. However, Tom Vecchio does the Daily ISO. It is a basketball podcast that goes up every morning. You can find that by searching for the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Tom is awesome. Would recommend follow him on Twitter at DFS_Tom, but also checking out the Daily ISO on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. He does NBA much better than I can. I'm really bad at the NBA. So Devontae, again, you have to teach me, but Tom is great too. So go to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed, search for that, check out Tom Vecchio at the Daily ISO, and follow Tom on Twitter at DFS_Tom. Jason, Max Kepler is out due to COVID. Yeah, I'm sad. It's Kepler, Garlic, and there was a pitcher, I think, who went on the injury list too. Love Max Kepler. Think he's great. Hopefully he's feeling okay. But a bummer for the Twins. I don't think that they're on tomorrow's main slate either. Let's pull up the main slate for tomorrow. Assuming that they go with the 6:10 start time. I don't know if they will, but pretty short slate if they don't. Yeah, no Twins tomorrow. So hopefully Kepler gets better soon. Thankfully, it's not Byron Buxton, but still, either way, that's rough for Max Kepler. How do you feel about Charlie Blackmon for tonight? So, Devontae, the reason that I don't like the Rockies in general is because they suck. However, Charlie Blackmon does not suck. So as a one-off, I think that Blackmon definitely does work. They're facing Luis Garcia, not a big strikeout guy. The numbers I have in the sheet for Garcia are for his big league career. Most of this has come in relief, so you want to take all these numbers and downgrade them because he's going to the rotation now. A spot start here with McCullers being sick. So I think that Blackmon works. I think any other individual batters for the Rockies are okay. So McMahon is a good hitter. I like him. Story is fine. It's harder to get to a full stack because the Rockies as a team are so bad. But for individual one-off guys like Blackmon, I think that they work as well. Favorite Astros one-offs, it's Carlos Correa. I love Carlos Correa. I think that he's tremendous. He's $3,600. We were talking about that this morning. But one thing you can do here for small samples is look up some expected numbers for different batters and see what they're doing. The expected numbers for Carlos Correa so far this year are very, very good. He's also striking out less. Strikeout rate is the number that's going to stabilize most quickly. In fact, he's up to 64 plate appearances, and his strikeout rate's probably pretty stable. So a 17% strikeout rate so far this year, that's pretty good, and it's probably going to stick around there. So a lower strikeout rate, hitting the ball decently hard. Let's see what the ground ball rate is here for Correa. 46%, still a little bit higher than you would like, but he's getting some barrels. So I think that for a one-off, Carlos Correa, tremendous. Bregman is super undersalaried at $3,500, assuming he's activated, which it sounds like he will be. If Alvarez plays, which again, not sure because of the defensive stuff, I would love him as well. So Correa, Bregman, Alvarez, all tremendous one-offs. Want to go there for sure. Question from Twitch from Ghost Blazer. Welcome back, Ghost Blazer. Home run call. Okay, I think we're going to go with the Cardinals here. Double Dong DeYoung went off last night. That's boring, so we're not going to go with him. Is it boring to go Paul Goldschmidt? Probably. Do I care? Not really. I do want to see what his numbers look like so far this year to make sure he's making some good contact. This will be for overall, not just versus lefties, but we can still at least get some insights here on what he's doing. 8% barrel rate, that's kind of underwhelming. Not a ton of power so far. So, but a 379 expected WOBA. Okay, we're going Paul Goldschmidt. It would be boring to go DeYoung again, so we'll go with Goldschmidt as one of the home run picks. I'm going to go back to Jared Walsh as well. He's facing Jordan Lyles Lyles is like allergic to ground balls, also doesn't get a lot of strikeouts. So Jared Walsh did not come through last night. I think he had a double, but didn't come through in the home run call. So Jared Walsh, Paul Goldschmidt, guaranteed home runs for today in MLB DFS, or if you're playing the home run challenge over on FanDuel, guaranteed to go deep. That is all the time that we have for today. But we are back again tomorrow, 4 p.m. Eastern, as always, here on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Twitter pages. So make sure you are subscribed on your platform of choice and get those questions in each and every day. And we'll answer them live here on air, no matter where you are watching. I also have the solo shot tomorrow morning. That is at 9 a.m. Eastern on the FanDuel YouTube page. Big thank you to Brandon Gdula for the lead in here and talking NFL draft with me. Follow Brandon on Twitter at Gdula13. I am on Twitter at Jim Sannes, JimSannes. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck to you tonight. We'll talk to you once again tomorrow. This has been the FanDuel Fantasy Q&A.